My name is Dr. Rafiu Oladipo.
My name is Baba Jalal Repega.
I'm Reverend Juliet Benite.
I'm Godio Didi.
My name is Professor Oladokun Sulaiman Olarawaju.
Souq News is on the ground, loading.
Very enlightening, very educative, and entertaining.
Thank you to Souq News.
So I'm happy that Souq TV has come into existence.
I'm happy to be here in the Souq News.
I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel and keep watching news that makes sense.
As Browning said, one's extension of one's reach should not exceed one's grasp, or what is heaven for? And I think Souq News is doing that.
Africa needs a voice of truth, and Souq News has become one of them. And get ready, get ready, get ready.
And keep watching.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. It's a place to be.
Keep watching. My name is Dr. Rafiu Oladipo.
My name is Baba Jalal Repega.
I'm Reverend Juliet Benite.
I'm Godio Didi.
My name is Professor Oladokun Sulaiman Olarawaju.
Souq News is on the ground, loading.
Very enlightening, very educative, and entertaining.
Thank you to Souq News.
So I'm happy that Souq TV has come into existence.
I'm happy to be here in the Souq News.
I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel and keep watching news that makes sense.
As Browning said, one's extension of one's reach should not exceed one's grasp, or what is heaven for? And I think Souq News is doing that.
Africa needs a voice of truth, and Souq News has become one of them. And get ready, get ready, get ready.
And keep watching.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. It's a place to be.
Keep watching.
My name is Dr. Ajili Tobi.
My name is Etemari Glover.
Naomi, well done, and shout out to Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. I want to encourage everyone to keep watching Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News, and yes, tune into them.
Keep watching Souq News. They are one in town.
Hey, we're watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. Catch them on YouTube and all social media channels.
Hey, my name is Frank Edowo, and I'm imploring you. No, forget that. I am forcing you, coercing you to always stay tuned to Souq News for your news requirements.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Eche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamas.
It's a national orientation agency. It's, as far as I'm concerned, very ideal and unprofessional.
Government says that subsidy is not in oil, and government is not supposed to be paying subsidy in oil.
Energy or whatever kind of off-grid solution we will be looking at.
Today we are conducting mining today. Solid minerals, as an example, is, in no disrespect to anybody, it's abysmal. We definitely need improvements in those areas. Of course, there are infrastructural needs.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
for us to look at issues related to business, finance, national development, and the economy. This is Daily Exchange, and I am Femi Ayodele. As you know, Daily Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development with our conversation. Today, we're going to continue with our special series on the World Economic Forum taking place in Davos. We're also going to look at the new inflation rate. You know, the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics has released the latest figure. These and more are the things we're going to talk about on today's edition of Daily Exchange. Don't forget, it's your program. This implies that you can be part of this conversation by going on our social media platform, on our YouTube page. Like I always say on this program, let your voice be heard. I am not alone. The beautiful Blessing is here. Good morning, and how are you today?
I'm very well, Femi. Good morning.
Yeah,
and it's good to be in Early Exchange today. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think the feeling is mutual.
That's great. You know, great minds always think alike.
Oh, yes, they do.
So the synergy will always be there.
Of course. And in Early Exchange, we are glad to help you start your day, provide you with insights on what's going on around the globe. And talking about what's going around the globe, the Davos Conference 2024 edition is ongoing.
Yes, that's what is grabbing headlines worldwide. You know, it's this among investors, you know, business, you know, community. That's the talk. And then, you know, it's very significant because it's also going to shape a lot of policies.
Of course it will.
That's our obligation on this program, to talk about policies and issues that have to do with development.
Yes, when you gather national security advisors from 83 countries, then of course you mean to make a policy that will not just shake the world, but shape it for a long time. And that means we'll be looking at what was discussed yesterday at the Davos conference, which talks about security and security and cooperation in an already fractured world. How do we restore peace? Or how will the world leaders restore peace at the World Economic Forum? This and more will be the focus of the day, but that will not be until we brought to you the news update, which Grace Komolafe is standing by to bring to you. Hello, Grace.
Hello and welcome to News Update on Souq News. I am Grace Komolafe. In a bid to boost the country's power supply, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission has granted 13 new licenses for off-grid and embedded power generation, independent electricity distribution, and electricity trading. According to a press release by the Commission, among the issued licenses, Daybreak Power Solutions, Ekiti Independent Power Project, Olokiti Power Distribution, Enba Power, Island Power, and Energy Company of Nigeria received licenses for various projects contributing to power generation, distribution, and trading in different regions. Now in UAE, in a move to broaden trade partnership for economic growth, the Emirate is partnering with Australia to initiate a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. In view of this, Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong is undertaking a diplomatic visit to Jordan, Israel, Palestine, and UAE to address economic and geopolitical challenges in the region. Emphasizing the importance of the UAE as a key partner in regional security, Wong expressed enthusiasm for the negotiations, aiming to strengthen the existing close friendship between the two nations. Away from that, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, has projected that artificial intelligence, AI, will impact nearly 40% of global jobs, posing greater risk and opportunities in advanced economies. According to the Gen AI, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Work report, about half of these jobs could face negative effects, while the rest may benefit from increased productivity. Advanced economies are expected to witness AI influencing about 6 in 10 jobs, which roughly half experiencing positive impacts. In contrast, emerging markets and poor countries are predicted to have 40% and 26% of job exposed to AI effects, respectively. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva, however, stressed the need for comprehensive social safety net to address the technology-driven inequality trend. Moving on, the introduction of U.S. sports Bitcoin ETFs has propelled Coinbase Global International into the forefront to crypto's most significant mainstream milestone to date. While this may appear as an advantageous position, it also entails a host of risk for the company and its associates. The recent commendations and recommendations of exchange trading funds directly investing in Bitcoin comes after the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission granted approval to nearly a dozen investment firms, including major players like BlackRock International and Franklin Templeton, representing a culminating of industry efforts over several years. These launches are seen as a pivotal development poised to fuel broader adoption of the world's largest cryptocurrency. And lastly, as global business leaders convene in Davos for the World Economic Forum, Oxfam Group, an anti-poverty group, has called for government to mitigate a stark reality of increasing wealth concentration. The group suggested measures such as breaking up monopolies, implementing taxes on excessive profits and wealth, and exploring alternatives to shareholders' control. According to a report by the group, since 2020, the combined fortunes of the world's 5 richest individuals have surged to $869 billion, while 5 billion people have experienced heightened poverty. The findings indicate that 7 out of 10 of the world's largest companies are now led or predominantly owned by billionaires, hence the need for a shift away from the current extreme shareholders' capitalization. The report also exposes the inflation-adjusted wealth surge of top billionaires, including Elon Musk, Larry Ellison, among others. Thank you for joining us on News Updates. Please stay tuned for more conversation on Early Exchange by Femi Ayodele and Blessing Eche. I am Grace Komalafe.
My name is Dr. Ajili Tobi.
My name is Etemere Glover. Naomi, well done, and shout out to Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. I want to encourage everyone to keep watching Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News, and yes, tune into them.
Keep watching Souq News. They are one in town.
Hey, we're watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. Catch them on YouTube and all social media channels.
Hey, my name is Frank Edowo, and I'm imploring you. No, forget that. I am forcing you, coercing you to always stay tuned to Souq News for your news requirements.
I'm okay.
My name is Raymond Bola Brown.
Hi, my name is Fred Amata, and you're on to Souq News.
If you're watching this channel for the first time, make sure you continue to watch it, because this is Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. Actually, I don't know. I really enjoyed the little moment I spent with you, and I think with more of this.
Souq News. Here's the Souq News, who had the courage to transcend a locked-off camera and actually have a conversation with a human being. It's a pleasure, Souq News. Thank you very much.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Eche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamanze.
It's a national orientation agency. It's, as far as I'm concerned, very idle and unprofessional.
Government says that subsidy is not in oil, and government is not supposed to be paying subsidy in oil.
Energy or whatever kind of off-grid solution we will be looking at.
Today we are conducting mining today. Solid minerals, as an example, is, in no disrespect to anybody, it's abysmal. We definitely need improvements in those areas. Of course, there are infrastructural needs.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, indeed, our obligation on this program is to shape policy and advance development with our conversation, and that's why we'll be looking at the World Economic Forum taking place in Davos. You know, the important event started yesterday where world leaders are gathering. over 100 world leaders are gathering together, to look at what will be the next phase for the global economy. So it's been a platform for coming up with policies that will shape the world and also resolve international crisis. Shortly, we're going to be joined by a guest who's going to provide his own perspective as regards the security, architecture for the forum or for the conference itself, the level of preparations and the level of security that has been deployed, to take care of this kind of sensitive forum. But Blessing, when you look at the World Economic Forum, it's something that you don't take with a pinch of salt. Because when it comes to global issues, that's where the decision makers come together annually to look at what could be done to look at global issues. This thing started in 1971, whereby, a professor from the University of Geneva, founded what we call World Economic Forum. But then it started with European Management Forum. So it was looking like affairs for the European countries. But at the time we became conscious of the fact that we need to expand the table to bring other countries to the table for negotiation, for them to be part of it, to create a sense of belonging. So in 1987, the name was changed from European Management Forum to World Economic Forum, to what is best known, the popular name now. And the essence of this platform is to gather world leaders to ensure that you create a platform for people to see eye to eye, look at global issues, and also resolve conflicts. The latest of the conflicts has to do with the one going on, the regional conflicts in the Middle East, the one going on between Israel and Gaza, has been of concern. And then that's why you have the theme for this year to be rebuilding trust, because there are conflicts here and there. And the question in the first place, does the trust exist in the first place? I remember the one that was done in 2020 was also talking about trust, but this time around the focus is rebuilding.
Yes.
The emphasis on the word rebuilding. When you're rebuilding the trust, it means the trust exists, but not in the full measure that it ought to exist. And now, this time around, the focus is for trust to be rebuilt, so that nations can collaborate. You can have, before you can coexist
peacefully.
Before you can have that kind of coexistence, there must be trust in the first place. Before I can entrust you with my resources, I say, okay, I want to invest in your country. There must be mutual trust. And that's why this platform is being geared towards creating that trust for countries to relate together. Interestingly, our own representatives are there. The Vice President is leading the delegates. So we also have the Minister of Finance and the Coordinating Minister for the Economy, Wale Edun, is also there. Yesterday, I was listening to a speech, and he said it was strategic for Nigeria to be part of the conversation because you can't become successful in isolation. It's a global space. So he said it was necessary for Nigeria to be part of the conversation, to be at the table, because the president is bent on making Nigeria, or restoring the glory of Nigeria as the giant of Africa. And so he talked about the Nigeria agenda to make some collaborations with international bodies, investors, and to see how they can reinforce, some of the earlier deals they've had to ensure that Nigeria achieve a better growth and development. So it's a smaller team, unlike what you used to have in the past, where you have a larger entourage going to that kind of forum.
And I understand why.
You understand why?
Yeah, to cut costs.
Yeah, that's strategic. And it's also an offshoot of what the president did recently, where he had to call the number of the fleet of cars in his entourage to ensure that they are cutting costs. So you have a smaller unit representing Nigeria, being headed by the Vice President and the Minister for Finance. So we're hoping it's going to be of good benefit to Nigeria. But a sensitive forum like this, we need to be part of the table.
Of course, it's called World Economic Forum for a reason, meaning that countries of the world are supposed to be part of it or expect us to be part of it. And then how do you stay in isolation while they make decisions that would affect you without you making your own input? So it's quite important that Nigeria be part of it. Now, it's not just Nigeria, there are other African countries. Now, the meeting actually started before even the 15th, which was the scheduled date for the World Economic Forum 2024 to begin. Now, on the eve of that day, which was Sunday, 14th January, there was a meeting of 83 national security advisors drawn from 83 countries. So, and they had some representatives from Africa as well. to talk about what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. Because like you mentioned, the theme this year is rebuilding trust. So that means that at some point in time, trust was built by countries of the world so they could deal in business, so they could live in peace together. But after some time, for some reasons, the trust have been broken. So there's a need to rebuild it because in different parts of the world, there are pockets of war. Now, in 2021, it was, or 2022 rather, it was that of Ukraine and Russia. People thought, oh, it's just going to be like maybe a few months. Before you know it, it's almost 2 years, if not more than almost 2 years of that same war, and the effect has been global. And then we're talking about the Middle East. So it's high time that something is done about it. That is why the first day started with achieving security and cooperation in a fractured world. So the world is fractured already. To what extent can we rebuild the fragments and come to a roundtable talk about peace? Now, that's been the major discussion yesterday, and so many talks have been ongoing. And it's strategic how they've been able to bring in countries that are part of the BRICS alliance because they have a relationship with Russia. So they're hoping that through that, some kind of influence. And it's quite interesting how they've been able to, although it was known that China is kind of influential and not just as an economic power, but when you talk about in relationship with Russia and how they could also influence the peace deal and all, because for Ukraine, they've come up with a 10-point agenda, a 10-point peace plan that outlines key terms of ending the war with Russia. So they're also hoping that while Ukraine is setting out its own outline, there will be enough influence on the side to prevail on Russia so that the world can have some peace. And it's going to move on to other areas. So you can't talk about economic development because already the forecast for this year, global forecast for this year, is pessimistic, is not looking so well. And that would even be reduced more when you have conflicts here and there. So it's strategic that they're talking about ensuring security, ensuring cooperation first, before growth, before other aspects that they're going to look at in this year's conference.
You know, talking about the security architecture, if you look at the level of preparation being deployed by the Swiss government, you know, they've deployed 5,000 soldiers, you know, Swiss Army to ensure they provide security for this kind of forum. Looking at the town Davos, or that small town, you know, has a population of about 10,000, and now with the people coming in, you're expecting over 2,000 delegates. And in fact, the projection is the population might increase to about 30,000. And that's why the Swiss government find it strategic to deploy about 5,000 soldiers, you know, including about thousands of policemen and other local securities that are to provide security architecture for this kind of forum. You could expect it, you know, in a kind of forum like this where world leaders are coming together. It's very important not to take the issue of security with a pinch of salt, and that's what they have done. And if you look at, you know, the business side of it, I'm also, because as a business reporter, that's also my concern. I'm also looking at the business side of it, what that conference, that forum, the kind of investment that will be coming to Davos, you know, in terms of tourism, in terms of hospitality, we will pay for daily services, and how it's going to improve the economy of that town within this week, and that is huge. And so this kind of forum is very sensitive because every leader is also coming on board to see what they can be part of how they can be part of the conversation. Part of what I guess raised yesterday was, you know, if you look at the security agenda, there's reference to that of Russia, there's reference to that of Israel, the crisis happening between Israel and Gaza, or you hardly have reference to crisis or security issues in Africa, in West Africa, and that's also important. And I also think the African leaders or the African representatives who are there also need to shape the agenda now that they are there or represented, so that by the time you're going to have this kind of conversation, issues related to Africa or West Africa will also be on the table, so that creates that sense of belonging. There are also these pockets of, you know, protests here and there as regards, you know, the rich dominating the conversation, and then
My name is Dr. Rafiu Oladipo.
My name is Baba Jalal Repega.
I'm Reverend Juliet Benite.
I'm Godio Didi.
My name is Professor
Souq News is on the ground, loading.
Very enlightening, very educative, and entertaining.
Thank you to Souq News.
So I'm happy that Souq TV has come into existence.
I'm happy to be here in the Souq News.
I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel and keep watching news that makes sense.
As Browning said, one's extension of one's reach should not exceed one's grasp, or what is heaven for. And I think Souq News is doing that.
Africa needs a voice of truth, and Souq News has become one of them. And get ready, get ready, get ready.
And keep watching.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. It's a place to be.
Keep watching.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing H.A., Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruwoje, and Idahosa Osamanze.
It's a national orientation agency. It's, as far as I'm concerned, very idle and unprofessional.
Government says that subsidy is not in oil, and government is not supposed to be paying subsidy in oil.
Energy or whatever kind of off-grid solution we will be looking at.
Today we are conducting mining today. Solid minerals, as an example, is, in no disrespect to anybody, it's abysmal. We definitely need improvements in those areas. Of course, there are infrastructural needs.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, we sincerely apologize for that interruption. The good thing is we are here, Early Exchange, moves on. And we're still looking at the World Economic Forum. It's a special series which we started yesterday. And today we're going to continue with that to look at some of the talking points and some of the key issues, the agenda for that forum. Today we'll be looking at the security agenda for that meeting, talking about the issue of global security. And we're being joined by our very own in-house analyst. We have Dr. Idahosa Osamanze here with us this morning. That you have you join us on Early Exchange.
Femi, good morning. Good morning, Blessing. Yeah.
Well, here we are. The World Economic Forum has started, and it's grabbing headlines worldwide. It's becoming, the greatest news. But we want to look at the architecture, or the security architecture as regards this conference. Reports have it that, the Swiss government has deployed about 5,000 army to join the local police, about 3,000 of them, and other security agencies to ensure that they provide security for this kind of meeting. I'd like to have your take on how significant it is to deploy this level of security apparatus to this kind of conference, and then the sensitivity of issue of security when it comes to business relations or economic relations or the issue of investment.
Well, I think globally the world faces huge challenge, and then of course we also know why that challenge is there, and that is because of the inequities and the inequalities that are bound in the world where we live in. And you have the rich becoming more richer and the poor becoming poorer, and the rich taking advantage of the nature provided for the poor to become richer and leave them behind. This is the real issue, and this is why when you look at the thing, they talk about rebuilding trust. How do you build a trust? Because we're living in an age of an information overload. So it becomes absolutely very difficult to convince people that you're doing something otherwise. If you use our own local experience together, if you remember those years preceding the death of the Nigerian president then Abacha in 1998, when of course there was this 1 million man march that was organized, a lot of people from the Niger Delta were moved to go to Abuja to protest for the president to contest election, who was a military dictator at that time. And that was the offspring of militancy in the Niger Delta. Why there were pockets of agitation before that time for environmental sanity, But by the time you move these local boys to go and queue in Abuja and saw what money was doing, and it became obvious to them that this money was coming from oil, they wanted it right now and then. And that created a whole lot of distortions, which we are still facing today in Nigeria. This is the way we have to look at global peace. Now, when you look at the very poor of the poor that are resident in Africa, now you're looking at it from the point of view that the Middle East, take for example, Kuwait, Iran, Syria, and you are looking at all these, the Gulf region where all these crises are coming out from. You discovered God has endowed them with a lot of oil potential, Saudi Arabia. And this has built the whole of Europe and North America. And the people there are not living life to its fullest. And so what you see is a protestation from the very poor nation. So if you have to build trust, the very first thing that you have to do is to see how to invest massively in this environment, to see that you are not just pillaging them, but you are really very much interested in what they're doing. That's one way to look at it. Take, for example, after the Second World War, Professor Marshall gave a plan on how Europe should be rebuilt. And one of the issues that took place at that point was to see how to bind Europe together and make them a stronger Europe. And this was what led to what we popularly now call the Marshall Plan, which was the release of grants by the great powers then to Europe to build that economy. They didn't just give them loan, they gave them grants. And these were free money that was pumped into Europe economy. And this money they were using to rebuild. And of course, they also designed a plan such that the European countries can trade more with themselves and then be able to leverage the opportunities that are abound. And this was what built Europe. Most countries in the world where, of course, we are having these challenges, especially back in Africa and part of the Middle East, need such Marshall Plan. But what you see is that the Western powers still using the divide and the rule approach to dealing with issues that has to do with Africa. That's one. Now, if you're looking for trust, you also need to build what I'll call mutual respect for each other. Why will America come to Africa and say, because we don't want homosexuals, you don't want to do business with us? This is a problem. It's because you don't respect us. Now, if you do that across the globe, what you are simply saying is that, look, you don't have regard for anybody. So you can't talk about trust. Now, you also go to these issues of, we're talking about Ukraine crisis. Everybody is moralizing these issues. The real key question is the fact that America is still trying to establish its global supremacy. Why will America be wanting to go put a gunboat at the backyard of Russia by admitting Ukraine into the Allied powers, or NATO, as it is called? That's what is precipitating the Ukrainian war. That Russia is saying this is our sphere of influence. So respect our sphere of influence. But America is not willing to respect the sphere of influence of the Russians. So how do you get peace? And we are mobilizing resources to pull down Russia. And don't forget, Russia also have friends. So these are the issues that are precipitating the security challenge that the world faces. So for me, at the center is the United States of America and the European powers. So we need to be real sincere and genuine in terms of really building a world today that is all-encompassing. Nobody is saying that they should not have the advantage, but while you are taking resources from other people, you must ensure that you are giving them the opportunity to also grow. Otherwise, we'll be moving around the same cycle, talking about trust and rebuilding trust.
All right. Now, since the focus yesterday was on achieving security and cooperation in a fractured world, and you've talked about the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Now, that's key among discussions as they talk about security. But there was a statement that is credited to the Swiss foreign minister, and he said that China plays a significant role. Now, he was referring to the restoration of peace as Ukraine presented a 10-point peace plan. What role exactly would China play, or can China play in this?
You see, China has become very significant to global power, and you cannot wish them away. And this is because they have also emerged, and they are becoming a superpower. After the humiliation from Britain through the gunboat, you know, many people don't remember the Opium War, how the Chinese were humiliated by the great powers and disempowered, so they didn't have military strength. Now, China is having both soft power and hard power, like every other thing. And then, of course, they are also asserting their rights. Especially you are having somebody who is ideologically oriented as the ruler of China. An ideology that is quite different from the American ideology. And so you are not going to tell him where he's going to bend. You cannot muzzle China today. It's not possible because they have been able to build power to a certain level. Whether it's in terms of wealth, whether it's in terms of technology, they have it and they can actually confront you. And where China swings because of the large size of their population and wealth is going to also determine what's going to happen. So what we're actually having is that we have left a multilateral world and we are drifting toward a bipolar world, which was what was in existence prior First World War and the Second World War. You have the Axis power and the Allied power all contesting. So it's either you are a communist bloc or you are in the capitalist bloc. That's where we are all going toward right now. So you see a lot of people gravitating toward China because China has become the big brother with so much money to help develop nations. And we're talking about sports in Africa. You see China bringing in money, good money to help Cote d'Ivoire build stadium as in form of grant. Now, who do you think that Cote d'Ivoire will be loyal to if they were a strong power in the world? They'll be loyal to China. So China have a lot of following. And China also needs equity in the world. China wants to be represented, not by Taiwan in Security Council, based on its power. So these are issues that you have to look at. And so they are critical player. The power is no longer residing in America alone. Power is also residing in some other places. And you're looking at smaller countries who are also building powers. And so they are teaching toward China. So China can give them ammunition. China can give them money. So you see North Korea towards China. India is looking for help anywhere so they can teach anywhere. So they can move toward Russia if that's where they can get their advantage from. So it's not about democracy, it's about the survival of the people. So people are playing survivor politics, and America must come to terms with this reality, that what is at stake is the survival of the people. And if people have to survive, then the need for equity in terms of how the world is governed is critical. First is to democratize the United Nations, where not just 5 countries, but the entire continents are represented in the Security Council with equal powers. So this is where, of course, we can be talking about security or talking about building of trust. So you have a world power who is advocating democracy, equality of right, but run a United Nations that is undemocratic.
All right. There's this sentiment that United States and all the European powers, set the agenda for the world. And then when you look at Africa, it's somehow missing out when it comes to the issue of inclusion now. What will you expect in a forum like this for African leaders to do to change the narrative? You have, world leaders gathering together to ensure that, the agenda about Africa is also being set on the table.
Yeah, I have said this yesterday, and I'll keep emphasizing this. There's no other way to go about this is for Africa to rediscover itself, and we must realize and understand this real fact, that nobody's going to give you power. Our president said it during the campaign, power is not served a la carte. Nobody is going to have you sit down in a table and want to commit power into your hand. You have to take it. So this is what Africans should realize. And we must strategize and sit down around ourselves and make ourselves relevant in the scheme of things. And not live in the age of eugenics. Because we are still living in the age of eugenics, where the Western powers and the Americans feel that Africans, they are subhumans. And we are living and acting as if we are subhumans. And you look at the pillaging of our nations. We are not investing in education. We are not investing in health. We are not investing in infrastructure. You are seeing few people who have access to power steal the money and take it to Europe to develop Europe. Small countries like Switzerland that have no resources are doing excellently well with the wealth that is moved from Africa into this country. And this is where the conversations are. It's not about just having meetings. All the money that is developing Switzerland is coming from Africa. We are still having abacha loot in Switzerland. And in natural law, if you receive stolen property, you are as guilty as the thief. Now, these are the real issues.
Blame Switzerland.
No. I'm not blaming Switzerland. And that's what I'm saying, that Africa needs to reinvent itself. We don't need to steal money to go and put in Switzerland to build Europe. We need to become Afrocentric in our thinking. We don't need to depend on Europe to grow. Africa must be deliberate in terms of setting an agenda for itself to say, we want to grow, we want to develop, and therefore, whatever it will take us to break out of poverty, we can. If countries like Singapore, countries like Malaysia, Thailand could break out of poverty, Africa can. And that's what we just need to do so that we can become relevant. Not going to conferences with a cap in hand begging for resources. We don't need that. We have everything, that God-given resource that is below the ground, above the ground, that Africa can mobilize and really grow itself. And then you can make yourself relevant and significant in the negotiation table. As long as we keep going to these places with cap in our hand begging for resources, there's really nothing. Nobody's going to respect you. Coming to beg you money or to borrow money from you. What respect do I have? Like the Holy Book says, a borrower is a slave to the lender.
All right, talking about Switzerland, what made them so significant to the world that it had to be picked as the venue of the World Economic Forum year after year? That the forum has, the conference has assumed the name of the city. It's now called the Davos Conference. Why is Switzerland so significant to the world?
Yeah, you see, if you understand the history of the world and how the world had evolved, you come to realize that what really transformed Switzerland was the theology of men like John Calvin, Zwingli, who at the time were in Geneva and they were crying and praying and asking real God to transform the society. And of course, that happened, that religion passed through Switzerland and they focus on how to live righteously. But like I say here every day, righteousness is what exalts a nation, sin is a reproach to any people. They became righteous and people were looking for how they can contribute to their society for development. And this was what was important. Volunteerism from everywhere, and they were able to build the economy that is based on righteousness. So you are not looking out for people who is stealing. And so what you have done by that is you create an ecosystem where your funds are safe, that if you bring your money here, nobody's going to steal it. So you have created that, personnel for yourself. And that's what Singapore has been able to do, Switzerland has been able to do, and create an environment where people feel safe and feel secure, that there's no crime. And he has gone there. And this has permeated their soul and their spirit. And so you are looking at a society that is free of crime, that is free of every form of fraud. And people know that if you put your things there, if it is 10, 100, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, the thing will be there and nobody's going to touch it. So this is what it is. And I think it's the value really that African society really need to also embrace, to see how we can create that ecosystem where people are trustworthy. That when we give people opportunity to lead us as governors, as president, as members of the House of Representatives, that is not all just for them to go sit down around the table and share the national or the commonwealth of the people, but they know that they also have the responsibility and they are accountable to the people, and this is what will build trust in our system. So we need to get African to that point where we exalt righteousness in the way we do things. And then, of course, crime goes down. Then you even see foreign powers who come to you to want to put money. And that's what has happened in Singapore. So what they did was to create an economic center where people know that, one, the ecosystem is safe. And you're also having to train people who are able to support the structure that you are building. And Switzerland has done that very well, and that's why they become as important as they are today, even though they have less of natural resources.
All right, still talking about the issue of security, you know, what Blessing said earlier, provided a kind of background where it sees national security advisors from different countries, you know, prior to the kickoff of the conference, came up with a 10-point agenda to seek, you know, a resolution to the crisis ongoing in Ukraine, the one between Russia and Ukraine, you know. What would you expect of the Ukrainian President Zelensky to do in a forum like this to mobilize resources or to ensure that he complements the 10-point peace agenda? What will you expect of him in a forum like this to do? What do you think should be his priority in a forum like this?
You see, from day one, since the Ukrainian war, I just felt that the president of Ukraine is relying on false hope from Europe and thinking that there's a way you can stand with Europe and then the whole of Europe and America bring their resources to you, and then you have to destroy your environment. You see, for me, really, it is for the president of Ukraine to drop the ambition and allow the status quo ante to remain. Whether you give conditions or 10 points that you say, oh, Europe is going to bring money, or people should not have relations with Russia, that will solve the problem. The only way to peace, as far as I'm concerned, in this area, is that you understand that the power that you are dealing with, Russia, is a strong world power. Strong world power. And they also have veto in United Nations. So you can't legislate them out, irrespective of what you're doing. And this is where, of course, for me, the Western country needs to pursue peace and not war. This idea that you say you want to defeat Russia, for me, is a starry-eyed dream. What we need to do is to sit down with Putin, president of Russia. He has only one request. And that request is simple. Don't break the status quo. Therefore, don't admit Ukraine into NATO. Leave them where they are. And I think that solves the problem.
NATO will also be part of this conference, and it has been even since yesterday. What do you expect the position of NATO to be at this point?
You see, when you see NATO as an organization is struggling for relevance, as it is, they are only trying to assert themselves. And they must be able to move beyond the politics of the Second World War and know that we are in a new world. And this new world order, and there are multiplicity of powers across the globe. And of course, we need to respect each other. Not the way that because you won the First World War, you won the Second World War, and therefore you are hoping to win a Third World War. The dynamics have changed. And I think NATO needs to take this to heart and then play by the new rules and the new dynamics, that even smaller nations are becoming as powerful. Because today, world power is no longer reckoned by the size of your army or the size of the weapons that you command. And this is why you see that terrorism is festering in the world, because it's an asymmetrical war. You actually don't know where your opponent is coming from, and you don't even know what they have.
All right, let's come back home now. Let's talk about Nigeria now. We have our representatives there. We have the Vice President, you have the Minister of Finance, and the Coordinating Minister for the Economy, you know, Wale Edo, a smaller team. What's your take, let me ask, of your opinion on this time around? You have a very smaller team representing Nigeria, unlike before where you have a large entourage and, you know, going for this kind of forum. What does that suggest to you about the disposition of the present government, about maybe cutting cost of governance? Is that significant for us to talk about it?
Yeah, it's quite significant because it's also to know that for me is one thing to make law and another thing to respect it. A circular came out last week and the president says because of reducing costs for government that we are trying to reduce the entourage of the federal governors, ministers and vice president. And on the sectorage, he said he cannot take more than 20 people on a single assignment, and for the president, 25 people. So this is, for me, you are living your word to say, okay, what do people really need to go and do in Davos, except to see we can have one common table as Africa shop where people can go out together and negotiate. For me, Davos is just a networking platform. And it's not more than that. And so as nation goes to Davos, they're not expecting anything tangible to come out of Davos. It's a talk shop. So we go there to negotiate. And so while the basic talk is going on and people are speculating how they feel the world can become safer, I think Nigerian delegation in Davos should be looking for people who have potentials that we can benefit from, who can bring foreign direct investment to us to be able to mitigate the infrastructure gap that we have in the country. That, for me, is what the essence of this conference is all about. And I think we must focus on the economic solution to our problem. And I still stand that there's a kind of a symbiotic relationship between poverty and crime. So if we are able to deal with the issue of poverty by creating more wealth and putting people up poverty line and creating opportunity for them to live, just like the old saying that if a man has nothing to live for, he can die for anything. So we have to create the opportunity that people have something that they want to live for. And they will not expose themselves to the dangers of either kidnapping, banditry, or terrorism. So this is where we need to focus and see how do we create that ecosystem where people who have genuine aspiration can find support. And those are the things that government can continue to work on. We have spoken to issues like addressing our basic macroeconomic challenges. How do we bring down inflation that is at today at 28.08%? How do we reduce the interest rate so that people can have access to credits, and that there are not too much of stringent measures? How do we open up our economic space to create more opportunities for people to be able to do business? How can we invite people to come around us and also create that sense of safety so that we have foreign direct investment flowing into Nigeria and creating wealth, and people can wake up in the morning and they are happy with their lives and they can move on? That reduces crime drastically. And I think that's where emphasis should be for us. So when we go out on such a forum, it's not for us to expect that there's something that they are going to give to you or hand that is going to fly from that thing, but we're supposed to speak to the world of the need for equity, the need for mutual respect. And this is all that I expect from our delegation in Davos.
All right, talking about networking, which you said the World Economic Forum basically is. Now, there's also the talk about cooperation, which has to do with security as well, and the need for well-planned crisis response. Now, so as Nigeria, African countries and other countries will be networking, what should be the focus regarding security? Because if you look at the issues highlighted when it comes to security, the pockets of insecurity going on in African countries were not mentioned as discussions. Is it because it's seen as they do not have, or they will not have, global implications? So how can African leaders at this point network to have the support of other countries? It could be in technology, it could be in intelligence, to have well-planned response to the crisis going on in Africa.
Yeah, you've answered it. So for me, it's because the crisis you see in Africa today really don't have any global impact that are severe. And that is what it is. So at the moment, what you're having in Africa, you're having people fighting themselves, too fighting. That's the way I want to describe the challenge in Africa. So one power who needs power, the other one needs power, so they are fighting themselves, and that's the kind of crisis in Africa. But when you go to what is happening in the Middle East, you're seeing transnational issues. That you're seeing that nations are coming together and aggregating themselves toward a particular nation. And that is where, of course, the fear of a global war become real, so to speak. So here in Africa, what we're having is two fighting. So, but elsewhere in the world,
sounds very domestic.
yeah. So what you have elsewhere in the world is much more than that. And you're seeing that nations. And take for example, if you look at the crisis in Russia, you see, it's not just Ukraine, Russia. That has crossed into Asia and has also dragged Europe into it. So the whole world is on it. Now, when you look at the crisis, for example, between the Hamas Israel challenge, you also see, because it's also attracting neighboring nations into it, because these elements are all in these nations, and they are aggregating and putting themselves together, and they have a common front to face the government. And this, of course, we have seen even in the attack on some ocean-going vessels that is, of course, trying to create some disruptions on the supply chain and the logistics across the globe. So these are things that are having global implication. So what you see in Africa, we don't have that kind of situation or scenario where what is happening in Nigeria, for example, is even affecting what's happening in the neighboring Benin Republic. So we don't have such crisis in Africa. And that's why I still feel that Africa, we are still safe. But we just need to put our house in order so we don't over-elevate poverty, politics at the expense of economic development. So if Africa can concentrate on its own issue, and take, for example, we can lawfully aspire to political office without necessarily have to go to hide in the bush and then be throwing arms here and there, Africa is in a better position to do this. And that's why a lot of people are also talking about the conspiracy theory. That, of course, some of the crisis that is here is just because some people are sponsoring it and creating that black spot to enable them to actually siphon what resources in Africa. So these, for me, are the real issues. So what we need to do as Africans is to address our local challenges, because our problems are local. And like they say, politics is local. Even security is local. So we must work out mechanisms to be able to address this issue, because we don't have the kind of problem that Europe is talking about because of the nature of their network. You see, one's affecting here can affect the other places, but we in Africa, we're having local and domestic issues. Brother fight brother. So we can settle our problem, really put our head together and see how to build a strong system where people with genuine aspiration can be given fair opportunity to participate without exclusion. And where also the zero-sum game nature of our politics, we address it to become non-zero-sum. In other words, winner does not take all. Because it's the winner-take-all politics that's actually the problem in Africa. That you see a whole lot of struggle and people want to capture power at all means. Once we reduce the attraction and we allow a level playing field for people to participate, the crisis in Africa will go down. So that for me is what it is. We really don't need the foreign powers to help us or to look for weapons to kill ourselves. We just need to address the issue of injustice in Africa and see how we can allow laws to govern us. We need to begin to allow the traditional institutions to begin to function and help in resolving. We need to revert to the old traditional judicial system in Africa to resolve some of the conflicts and challenges that faces us. And once we do that in Africa, we will be able to address the security challenge that faces us. And then, of course, we begin to see how we elevate morality in the society. Because politicians cannot be unrighteous and be having people who have not eaten, who are hungry, to become righteous. So when we see them righteous at the top, those who are below will begin to learn righteousness. I think these are the area where we need to really have to work hard as African leaders.
Now, looking at the history of the World Economic Forum, and the impact it has brought to Davos, that, like you call it, that small town, but over the years, the impact has been huge. Now, the founder, part of the agenda is to also see how they can attract investment to that town, and you can bet it that the impact has been very phenomenal. Now, what are the lessons for Nigeria, in terms of looking at the development this has brought to this small town? There are people who argue, okay, maybe Nigeria needs to have its own Davos conference to attract investment. And I even saw a report, apart from business leader, going to Davos, you also have service providers, even prostitutes, going there, which is also adding to the development of the economy of that town. Now, what are the lessons learned for Nigeria looking at the impact of this conference on Davos?
Well, we just have a mini Davos in Saudi Arabia, but you cannot determine whether the impact is as grand as what you are having. But don't forget, like they say in marketing, that's the first mover advantage. Somebody has taken an initiative and is working on that initiative and is greatly putting all his energy to see this thing work. You see, Davos became very important when the conversation among international relations experts about how really to strengthen the international organizations to become as powerful as possible, such that when they make pronouncement, it's obeyed by everybody. In short, the World Economic Forum has even gone as far. They have written a document, and you can get that from the internet. I think you need to read that document, which is called the Constitution of the Federation Act, to put together to see how to put a governmental or supranational governmental body in place globally, such that this international organization can make a pronouncement and the whole world will obey. And if you see in that document, you see the global parliament, that of course will be a conglomeration of all the parliaments of all nations. You have the assemblies of heads of states, and this documentation has been undergoing ratification since 1976. And you even see the names of prominent Nigerians who are signed on our behalf, ratifying that document. But you can't enforce it, really.
I was going to ask that because we've had institutions like the United Nations. We've had even IMF being an economic power with its policies and all, trying to enforce some policies. So how would this work? What would be different about it?
Yeah, but it's the same approach, because the United Nations is a toothless bulldog. Even with all the energy that the superpowers are brought around it to see how lesser countries are brought to book. But the real issue is not about countries who have no power. You can deal with Panama. But who will bring America to book when they violate international policies or proclamations? So this is where the issues are. So we need to create a world that is equal, where all sovereignty is respected. And that's where the real challenge is. So sovereignties of some nations are not respected. It's only some big powers that, of course, can do and undo. So we need to get to that point in our global conversation where we have to respect, based on the laws and the principles of the United Nations, that sovereign nation has equality. And if all sovereign nations are equal, because by virtue of having a land, having a government, and having a constitution that govern them, then of course the world must respect these smaller nations. And that is the only way that you can begin to talk about the implementation of some of all these things. So, but what Davos is trying to do is to say, how do we actually put to life that supranational authority that can oversee nations? But what I talks about is a talk show, is that after you finish in Davos,
everybody goes home.
Goes back home. And you even see where, of course, we were celebrating multilateralism And when Donald Trump came and said to your tent, O Israel, American for America, so you go and do your own. So you have these tendencies from leaders from these global powers that will make these things not to work. Because like I said yesterday on this same table, international relations is just an extension of your domestic policy. And the domestic policy is always about the welfare of your citizens and the interests that you represent. So people go out there to seek their interests. And I think that's why, of course, interest cannot co-terminate as far as the world is concerned. Because there'll be a loser and there's always a winner.
Well, I hope that someday there will be a word of equity and the balance. But how that balance will be achieved, we do not know. We just hope that it happens from talks going on in diverse countries, and world leaders, when they get back to the respective countries, will in one way make some positive implementation of all the discussions and doesn't end as a talk show. That said, we're done talking about Davos for today. Thank you very much, Davos Samanze, for bringing so much insight on the show today.
Thank you, Blessing. Femi, thank you so very much.
Always a pleasure.
But that doesn't mean we're done with Early Exchange, not at all. We're going to quick break or return to look at something else. Stay tuned.
Leadership is basically built on trust. Trust is the currency of brand. And the leader's brand is what attracts people to him to be inspired by it. Trust is the currency of brand. And the leader's brand is what attracts people to him to be inspired by it. And that trust is built on 3 key pillars. And the first one is basically being your true authentic self, or your credibility. And the Greeks call that your ethos. The second one is the rigor of your logic, the soundness of your discourse. And that's the Greeks called logos. And the third one is your empathy. And that empathy the Greeks call pathos. As a leader, people see and sense from you your distraction towards them. And think about the person that you visit your most distraction to, be it your spouse, be it your colleague, your staff. The one that you visit the most distraction to is the one that you most withhold your empathy, and they can feel it. Think about it. Somebody sitting in front of you and interviewing for a job, and they keep looking at their phone. How likely are you to give them that job? Probably not. But you display that all the time to people that look up to you, and you wonder why they don't see you as an effective leader. The other one, being the rigor of logic, is a bit easier to tackle because throughout life, we are always on learning and relearning. And the best thing to do to stay current, apart from having your deep area of specialization, is to have what we call an inch deep and mile wide knowledge of a whole plethora of things, wide variety of things you learn about that makes you connected to people on various levels and increases your network. I think the other one, which is the credibility, is the one that we most flaunt. And that is the one that has got to do with being your true authentic self. And you find a lot of people, especially on social media, are trying to portray what they are not. They are trying to fake it. And it comes across very quickly when you are not being your true authentic self. And people pick it up and they don't trust you. If they don't trust you, they don't look up to you as a leader. Leadership is important. It is true leadership that we can nurture people to become future leaders. But we have to do it right. We have to earn it.
My name is Dr. Agility Obi.
My name is Etemari Glover.
Naomi, well done, and shout out to Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. I want to encourage everyone to keep watching Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News, and yes, tune into them.
Keep watching Souq News. They are one in town.
Hey, we're watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. Catch them on YouTube and all social media channels.
Hey, my name is Frank Edowo, and I'm imploring you. No, forget that. I am forcing you, coercing you to always stay tuned to Souq News for your news requirements.
Morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamanze.
It's a national orientation agency. It's, as far as I'm concerned, very idle and unprofessional.
Government says that subsidy is not in oil, and government is not supposed to be paying subsidy in oil.
Energy or whatever kind of off-grid solution we will be looking at.
Today we are conducting mining today. Solid minerals, as an example, is, in no disrespect to anybody, it's abysmal. We definitely need improvements in those areas. Of course, there are infrastructural needs.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Glad to know you're still there with us. It's still Early Exchange, and our next focus is going to be on the inflation rate. According to the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, the latest figure released for Nigeria is 28.9%, according to this agency, as at December 2023. We want to look at the impact of these. What does this suggest to the common man on the street? What will be the impact of these on the Nigeria economic growth and development? To shed more light on this, we're being joined by a financial analyst who is our special guest this morning. We have the pleasure of hosting Mukhtar Mohammed, who is joining us virtually. Glad to have you join us on Early Exchange this morning.
Thank you for having me. And compliment of the season. I don't know if I've been on your program this year, but compliments of the season.
Yeah, I would like to say, I wish the same, and we're glad to be your host this morning. It's always a pleasure having you around on Early Exchange.
Thank
All
you.
right. Now let's look at this figure. According to the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, the latest figure being released is 28.9%, looking at the consumer price index. We'd like you to provide a background and for our viewers to understand the significance of these and what will be the impact of these on the common man on the street. Give us a better understanding.
Well, thank you again. I think the better understanding is already being felt by the common man on the street because cost of goods and services have gone up. It's not going down anytime soon. If you look at those inflation numbers, I think it was in a program I'm saying that we are doing copy and paste in terms of addressing inflationary pressure. And one of those things we are doing is that we are not attacking the real issue. We are just trying to deal with the symptoms. Why the disease is still there. Instead of trying to get a cure, a medicine for the disease, we are just following the symptoms. And if you look at these figures that came from Bureau of Statistics, it shows that food inflation, which is what concerns the ordinary man, is the one that had the highest inflationary pressure, which is about 33.2%. So, about 33.2%, which is high, and that's continued to be high up to this moment. So, I think what we've seen is what that means again is the cost of food has gone up, the income of the average Nigerian has not gone up, and so we are not having any solution to the inflationary pressure. I'm not surprised. I think I said it before now that I won't be surprised that inflation will hit 30%. I expect that trend to continue until the first quarter of this year. Maybe we'll start seeing a reduction in terms of inflationary pressure. And again, that we might want, will we be rejoicing over that because inflationary pressure has come down, then now cost of goods and services have come down? No, we might not enjoy that. We might not see those costs come down because, again, inflation is one thing, cost of production is another thing, microeconomic activities is another thing, the monetary policy activities is also another thing that for inflation. So until we get these three variables to come together, we'll continue to suffer this inflationary pressure that we're encountering now. So it's not anything good news yet, but it's not bad news. Remember that the government said they are going to declare an emergency in the food sector. The president have declared that we will still have green revolution. He have said that they have ordered that they should release green from the warehouse to a lot of farmers. But like I said, we can't begin to see those impacts immediately, because where we are today didn't take us 1 week or 2 months to be there. We've been going through this process for the past 11 months. So it might take time, especially when you are dealing with agricultural products that have seasons. So definitely for now, I think that challenge is there, but I think it's not all bad news if we do the right thing.
All right. Looking at the inflation rate released by the NBS, if you look at it being broken down, it's rose. The one of December rose by about 0.72% compared to that of November 2023. But looking further, we find that food inflation rose as high as 33.93%, and that's a record high. Now, for food items that contributed to the rise in food inflation, we have oil, meat, bread, and cereals. We also have potatoes, yam, fish, milk, and cheese, and also eggs. Now, these are food consumed locally, and most of them also produced locally. Meat, yes, is sourced, most of it sourced locally, apart from poultry, and then yam produced here locally. Bread, we could attribute that to maybe wheat and others. But basically, food inflation is what has driven the inflation rate so high. How do we handle that? All right, we have a bit of connection issue with Mokhtar. Once that is restored, we'll continue our conversation with him. But in the meantime, Femi consumes food as much as I do. Maybe not as much, but as well as I do. So knowing that food inflation is what is driven the total inflation rate to as high as 28.92%, and we have food inflation at 33.93%, isn't that scary?
You know, it's scary, but we're not surprised, you know, because if you're following the trend in the last 6 months or 1 year, thereabout, you've had consistently, we've been having 2-digit inflation rate. And if you follow that trend, you won't be surprised with the latest figure, because you must understand the significance of the peculiarity of our economy. When you have an economy that is import-driven, you always have instances where you don't have control over your local production. Talking about food production, the greatest challenge has to be the fact that when it comes to the factors responsible for the production of this product, you discover that farmers are struggling when it comes to getting the right seedlings for them to run their farms or to do the right cultivation, and it's becoming a challenge. If you look at those who are engaged in goods and services, on the production of goods and services, the manufacturers, they're also struggling in business, looking at the cost of doing business. When you talk about the cost of doing business, you have to look at the cost of power, you know, the cost of, you know, the running cost, the issue of generator, and then seeking alternative to power supply. And this is adding to the cost of operation. And generally, if you look at the business environment in Nigeria, it's not that friendly. You know, no matter how much you want to be very optimistic, it's also good to be realistic, because the essence of that is painting the picture as it is. And so when you look at all these factors coming together, it's a combination of several factors. When you look at the business environment, when you look at the cost of doing business, and then you look at some of the policies too, you discover that manufacturers are really struggling, to the extent that some of them will have to downsize, will have to narrow their operations to survive in business. In fact, most importantly, what most of them are doing is to see how they can survive in business first, not just breaking evens, and not the fact that they want to, you know, achieve maximum profit. But if you have that kind of situation, then you can imagine what will be the impact, and then generally what will be the impact of Nigerians. And then looking at the food insecurity, you have several challenges, the issue of insecurity in some part of the Northeast, where farmers cannot even access their farms. You know, if you look at some of the crises going on in the Northeast, which the bulk of them are farmers. Some of them do not commercial farmers, or those who are just doing peasant farming in a smaller way to provide for their family. But at large, when you look at the impact of the insecurity, it also affects the issue of food production, where people who have come up with you know, a special arrangement to engage in farming or food production But when it comes to the issue of insecurity, they can't access those farms or those facilities, and that would be of concern. So these are issues that play out, and in the latter rain, you just discover that things are not working the way it ought to work. But we have a president who has given the resolve to ensure that he will do everything within his power to ensure that Nigeria gets back on its feet. He has given instruction that grains should be released to farmers for them to be able to do proper farming. And there are also other policies coming on board to ensure that the status quo is being improved. So by and large, you see that if you follow the figures over the years, you won't be surprised with the latest figure that the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics has come up with. And like what Muta said, we might likely have this trend, maybe the first quarter of the year. Don't forget that the federal government is also proposing to also increase the minimum wage by April 1st. And if that happens, that's going to give another effect to what you have. Where there may be the layman argument that, okay, since the prices of goods and services are increasing, workers are not earning more. And by the time you earn more, you understand, it might likely affect the impact. But it's a layman argument, because until the reality stares out, you discover that in reality, it won't even solve the problem. Yes. That brings up another challenge. But the reality is, Nigeria as a country, we need to see how we can, improve our local production, encourage manufacturers to do well in businesses by providing the right environment, the right business environment for them to be able to do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I think that we should be looking seriously at food security, achieving food security, because until food inflation is controlled, then we would not be looking at a very possible way to control inflation, because people can afford to stay off certain commodities, certain items, but food you need for survival. So that's very key. The insecurity in some parts of the country is also an issue that we cannot run away from. It's also contributing to the low output that we're seeing. Because if we look at the food, the breakdown of the food inflation and food items that contributed to it, yam, for instance, how expensive it's become. Is it because of, some would say, oh, we do not have so many persons go into farming. But I think we should also be looking at the reasons why we do not have much people go into farming these days. Apart from the land not being so available in some places or in quantity that you would expect that it should be for farming, there is also the fear, particularly those who are in the rural areas. Now, the access road connecting the farms and the towns where you have the major markets, how good are they? How motorable are they? Now, bringing food items from those roads could be almost like a nightmare where you have, in regions where you have very high levels of insecurity. So until those things are being tackled. Now, I think that even within the city where there is space, we can begin to have farm settlements where there is mechanized farming, not leaving it to people to do as much as their capacity can handle. So when we begin to handle this and see how we can even substitute. Now, look at bread, for instance. The price of bread keeps going higher and higher. And it's a staple as well, even though it's not like a primary food. It's something that is made, but it's a staple. In every home, it's almost like the go-to for breakfast. People don't think much about breakfast. It's just like, it's almost synonymous, breakfast and bread, But if we can have some substitution for wheat, then I think that's to a good extent to reduce the cost of bread. And then for eggs, the problem with poultry is also extending to that of eggs. The feeds for even the chickens that will lay the eggs, these are some of the issues that we need to begin to look at. Now, when I say we, it's a combination of efforts. Now, government on their own side providing the help that they can in terms of land, in terms of even the farm and the support, extension workers to teach on new ways to do this and improving security. And also for every one of us, where we can do a little bit of farming to sustain for ourselves, then I think we should by all means do that. The good news is that Mokhtar is back and he can continue the conversation with us. Hello, Mokhtar. Please, can you unmute your mic so we can have the conversation? Okay, I can see you, and I know that you can. So can you unmute your mic so that we can have a discussion?
Yeah, I've unmuted.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Good to have you back. So before
Thank
that
you. Sorry, it was a
interruption
power surge.
by network, I was asking, what is the way to go about the rise in food inflation? Now, we've seen that food items that have contributed to the food inflation rate being at 33.93%, majorly food items that are consumed locally and some of them being made here. So what can we do about that?
Well, I talk about local consumption and I talk about the cost of production. So even when we do this food locally, then the cost of production you need to put it. Not to forget that cost of transportation has gone up, so that will also goes in line with cost of production. You have the insecurity problem. Most of these farmers goes to their farm being guided either by private security or have to pay fee to the bandits to get their goods up back to the market or through. So a lot of things are involved in that too. And also, you must not also forget that we have the issue that we have to do with the machinery. Sometimes some of the machineries that are used for these productions are not made locally, so they have to sort for FX to bring this machinery in, and sometimes they have to sort through the parallel market, which is not even available. So when you look at that, you won't be too surprised where you are now, what you're seeing presently now. So yes, and then if you look at some of those that are at the height of inflation, like you said, those that are locally produced. Also, you also have to look at those that are foreign produced, and you look at how much of those products are being used. The local, how many Nigerians patronize the locals, and how many Nigerians patronize the foreign goods. And when you look at cereal like milk and others, you realize that a lot of Nigerians patronize the foreign mix than the local mix. So, and again, like I said, some of these machineries also are not produced here. So that add to what I have said about the cost of production. So that is the major factor driving inflation in local production for me. And that could be addressed if we begin to come up with palliative and means on how to drive local production, and which will be cheaper.
All right. Nigeria has maintained a double-digit inflation for a while now, and according to the projection you made earlier, this may likely dovetail to the first part of this year. I would like you to talk about some of the things the federal government needs to do, on the short term, then on the long term, to curtail this trend so that the inflation rate could, if not maintain a single digit, we can have a better figure or statistics as the year goes by.
Yes, like I said in my introduction, I said that we are doing copying and paste. We are not looking at the main cause of our issues, and we try to hike rate, we try to do a lot of things. The former CBN governor, unorthodox way, trying to do direct intervention. Like I said, we are just attacking the symptoms. We are just not dealing with the root cause. I can tell you that the root cause of inflation in Nigeria has to do with exchange rate volatility. If you address the exchange rate volatility, you see inflation will naturally come down. That happened in Kenya. It did that, and today inflation has come down. You can see inflation coming down in Ghana too, because they've been able to address those issues. So for me, I think what we need to do is to continue to look at ways that we could address this volatility. Volatility is key in especially FX volatility. And the way we can do that is making FX available for agricultural items or machines. But again, you don't even have the FX, so how do you have to make it available? So we have to attract FX into the economy. We have to do that. NNPC is helping. We have about 2-point-something billion that have come into the foreign reserve, part of what we want is to stabilize the exchange rate. And we saw that play up in the autonomous exchange market, where the rate went low at 835 naira to the dollar yesterday. So maybe hopefully when we address this exchange rate volatility, we'll see definitely cost of inflation, cost of goods and services will come down, because inflation, FX volatility is the root cause of inflation in Nigeria, not hiking rate. Rather, when you do the hiking rate, it has also gotten that to increase the cost of production, especially for local people by cost of funding goes up, and so they borrow at a higher rate than a low rate. The other way is for government to go into the farmers and begin to give them single-digit loans. I remember we've done that before. We did it during the time that during President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan time, when the current president of African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, was the Minister for Agriculture. We saw how that worked because they didn't do it directly to the CBN like what happened during Buhari administration, but they did it through partnering with the local banks, because these banks are able to identify these farmers through what they've done through their accounts, not what we saw in the rice anchor borrowing scheme where the CBN directly was funding politicians in the name of farmers. So we need to look at that again. Before now, we used to have an agricultural cooperative bank where the farmers come together and set up a cooperative society, and they're able to accept loan, and they were able to help in their agricultural production, bringing down the cost of goods. We've not seen that again. That bank went under. No government have tried to revitalize that bank again. Also, government say they released green for farmers, but it seems that farmers are not seeing this green, so the government need to look at that aspect. So, and fortunately enough, the president have declared an emergency for food and security. Hopefully, we'll begin to see those results going forward in the near term.
All right. Now, if you look at the pattern of the rise of inflation in the year 2023, it kept rising from month to month, except for a month or two where it had just a slight decrease. But it's consistent with the pattern of rise as witnessed in 2016 and 2020. Is there anything significant that is of common among these years, 2016, 2020, and 2023? Is there any lesson to learn there?
Yes, something is common. Remember in 2015, after Buhari came to power, then exchange rate went to as high as 520. And then when we came up with the import-export window, then we saw that rate come down to about 360, and we maintained that for a long time before the pandemic came and then everything went back. So that's so definitely that brings us back to what I'm saying, that if you look at that pattern, you realize that from 2020, 21, 22, 23, exchange rate has continuously been very volatile, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. So you can draw that scenario that the challenge that is driving inflation in Nigeria thus far has to do with exchange rate volatility. So what are we supposed to do? Address that volatility. How do you address that volatility? Make FX available for farmers, especially those that are into agriculture. Maybe they are importing these goods into the country, the machineries. Can they get a tax waiver? A lot of things that government can do. We just have to learn from the Kenya experience. Kenya decided to give tax waivers to some of these agricultural items, and that brought down the cost of production. So we need to begin to look at that. But again, when it comes to waiver, it has been abused. So we must make sure we are giving the waiver to the right people that need to bring this product to Nigeria, machines or whatever they need to bring into this country. So I think if you look at that, thank God you've pointed it out. From 2015, remember it was 2016 that President Buhari came to power. And before Jonathan left power, that 2015, we started seeing this rise in inflationary pressure because of the exchange rate. And I think it was in 2017, maybe towards late December of that year, when the then vice president was acting president, and we came up with the import-export window, and we allow market forces to determine. We moved the exchange rate from about 250 then to about 360, and we saw everything stabilize, and we enjoyed those flow until COVID-19 pandemic. After that, up to this moment, we are still suffering from inflationary pressure.
All right. Let's look at what may likely play out come April 1st, when the federal government intends to increase the national minimum wage. Going by the concept of inflation, or the general definition of inflation, what might likely be the impact of this if the federal government increases the national minimum wage come April 1st?
One thing you should know is that I think they're driving it to April 1st so that they should know that inflation has come down before they increase the rate. I can tell you that it's not the minimum wage that will definitely help inflation flow. I keep saying it is the exchange rate, and I repeat it. If at April exchange rate is still volatile the way it is now, you've not attract inflow, you've not been able to stabilize the exchange rate. Even if you increase the minimum wage or not, inflation will still be there. If by April you are able to stabilize the minimum wage, then you are now you increase worker salary. You will see that the inflationary pressure that we are fighting will not be there that much like what we are encountering now. Don't to forget that Nigeria is a consumer-driven economy, whereby we rely on companies that are bringing in consumable. That's what drives our economy. And that sector has not strived for a very long time because the earning capability of an average Nigerian has gone down. So what you are seeing now is just that even when you are dealing with inflation, you are also dealing with a lot of companies not making sales because people are not buying the way they used to buy before. And that also is driving these companies to reduce their workforce. So that's what I talk about microeconomy. So that is a microeconomic issues that need to be resolved. Monetary policy, you stabilize the exchange rate. Microeconomy, you have to pay those living wage so that people will be able to purchase, so that companies will not be sending people home. And then once you deal with those two factors, you will see that naturally companies will begin to strive, employment will be available for Nigerians, youth and other Nigerians, and then you see that rate will come down once there's stability in the exchange rate. Then you see inflation will naturally come down. I don't think that the major cause of inflation will be so much because minimum wage was increased. I think the major cause of inflation, which I think the CBN or those in the economic team of the president know, is exchange rate.
All right, now let's look at the expected growth rate for Nigeria. It expected that Nigeria's economy will grow at 3.4% between 2023 to 2025. We are in 2024 now. What should be done differently to achieve this or even surpass the projected growth?
Look, I'm not so much excited when it comes to growth because we have seen that growth in Nigeria has to deal with production of crude. Once we get it in that area, then our growth comes up. I think the one we should be looking at is the real growth, a growth that will come from the bottom up, not from the up down. The growth that we're seeing in the Nigerian economy has to do with revenue for government because of cost of output has gone up, so government tend to have more revenue. When we talk about the real growth, how many jobs are being created? That's what we should be looking at, not because of growth in terms of of output. And then we are selling more, so it's like a company that is improvement. There's improvement in your output, and then but again, the profit margin is still low because a lot of things are not being done well. So the same thing that has to do with Nigerian growth rate has mostly to do with our able to produce, especially our output in the oil sector. So we need to begin to look at growth of our economy in the area of how many jobs were created, how many companies came into Nigeria, how much did we attract in terms of foreign direct investment, how much do we attract what happened in capital exportation. So those are things that we need to begin to look at to begin to address our growth rate. So for me, I'm not too excited when you talk growth these days. So all the government will increase production and then growth rate will go up. But the real growth rate that will determine the prosperity of your economy is how much job is provided, how much people are moved from the poor to the middle class, and how much are moved from the middle class to the rich. That is what determines your economic growth, not because of the output that you are doing. So I think government should concentrate more on the area of growth, the real growth in terms of the bottom-up approach, rather than looking at production.
All right, we need to go on a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with our conversation with our special guest. Stay with us.
My name is Dr. Rafiu Oladipo.
My name is Baba Jalal Repega.
I'm Reverend Juliet Benite.
I'm Godio Didi.
My name is Professor Oladokun Sulaiman Olarawaju.
Souq News is on the ground, loading.
Very enlightening, very educative, and entertaining.
Thank you to Souq News.
So I'm happy that Souq TV has come into existence.
I'm happy to be here in the Souq News.
I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel and keep watching news that makes sense.
As Browning said, one's extension of one's reach should not exceed one's grasp, or what is heaven for? And I think Souq News is doing that.
Africa needs a voice of truth, and Souq News has become one of them. And get ready, get ready, get ready.
And keep watching.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. It's a place to be.
Keep watching.
My name is Olatunji Shoti Miri. I'm a performing artist and television radio presenter and a university lecturer, Unilag. Keep watching Souq News.
Hello everyone, my name is Kenny Black, Africa's finest music comedian, and you're watching Souq News. If you're not watching Souq News, I pity you, but keep watching Souq News.
Hello everyone, my name is Timida Kolo and you're watching Souq News. Stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Wisdom Oluwaseun Okoko, co-founder Orbit Africa Properties. I'm live at Souq News. Guys, keep watching Souq News. For everything that concerns business, economy, politics, news, Souq News is your station.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing H.A., Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamanze.
It's a national orientation agency. It's, as far as I'm concerned, very idle and unprofessional.
If government says that subsidy is not in oil and government is not supposed to be paying subsidy in oil,
Energy or whatever kind of off-grid solution we will be looking at.
Today we are conducting mining today. Solid minerals, as an example, is, in no disrespect to anybody, it's abysmal. We definitely need improvements in those areas. Of course, there are infrastructural needs.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Glad to know you're still there with us. Earlier, we started a conversation on the new inflation rate in Nigeria, which is at 28.9% as of December 2023. And now we want to look at a report suggesting that banks in Nigeria are battling with impaired loans, rising loans as of 2023, and the effect is also coming at play in January 2024. We still have our special guest with us. He's a financial analyst. We still have Mukhtar Mohammed with us on Early Exchange. Glad to know you're still there with us.
Thank you so much.
All right. Let's go to this report suggesting that banks in Nigeria, are battling with impaired loans. For our viewers to have a better understanding, I would like you to provide a background and explain to us the concept of impaired loans. What are the factors responsible for this development?
Yeah, for viewers, I think it just impaired loan is loans that were not. A lot of people could not pay. Maybe you promised to pay, you're supposed to pay at the end of the year. You could not even pay, and the interest keep accumulating, and yet you're not able to pay, and that's the challenge. That's just, in simple terms, not able to pay your loans collected for business or one thing or the other. And so we've had those challenges. Like I said before we went on break, we're a consumer-driven economy, a situation whereby you're producing and a lot of people are not buying. Then you will not be able to make sales, and so when you're not making sales, you'll not be able to pay your loan. So it's as simple as that. That's what is happening in our economy these days, because we are producing so much that people don't have the earning capability to buy as much as they used to buy before. And we've collected this loan to expand, thinking that, okay, because of the population, because of our sales before. And so for me, that's why we are having the challenges we are having in terms of impaired loan, because consumers are no more buying, because people that used to buy two now buy one. Some of them don't even buy again. Some of them look at other means where they could buy. And some of these companies are not able to service their debts because they are not making sales.
Let's look at the interest rates too. Does it have anything to do with why the rates of impaired loans is rising?
Yes, it could have. Yes, it will have, definitely, because again, once rate is high, your cost of funding go high, cost of payment go high, and then cost of business, it's also gone high. But again, the one you don't have control over is how many number of consumers are now going to come and buy your product. So when you drive all these costs high, and yet again, you are not able to have people to buy it, definitely that means you will not be able to service your debt. So basically, it's just like a snowball effect. What happened to one then happened to the other. That's why we keep saying that to address Nigerian issues, especially whether we're talking about reducing imperial loan or whether we are talking about taming inflation, we need to begin to look at stabilization. We need to begin to do things different. We must come up with our own homegrown economic methods, which has to do with what is peculiar with our systems. You see, we started this hike with America, with the UK, and today inflation has gone down in those places and we are still battling it. That tells us that we are just doing copy and paste. We need to do things structural. We need to look at our economy. Do we want to build an ingrown economy, or do we want to build an economy that should be global? Then if you want to do that, if you're thinking of global, you need to attract those investors. You need to stabilize your rate. If you're thinking of doing an ingrown economy, then you need to begin to think about social interventions in some key areas of Nigerian economy to drive to make sure that you bring down some of these challenges that they are encountering. So it's a big challenge, and why we are not feeling that in the banking sector today, because you said, okay, the banks have not have imperial loan has gone up, but yet you are not seeing it in their balance sheet. Just has to do with the revaluation of the exchange rate, which make the banks to become more liquid, because the exchange rate at the time before now was 360, has gone up as high as 800 officially. So it helped their balance sheet to grow. But the real sector that are supposed to drive your growth for the long term, having challenges paying those loans. So it's a big challenge. It's a time bomb that is waiting to happen if something is not done urgently.
All right, let's also look at the accusations of insider borrowing in some of these banks. If there's anything to go by, what can be done to check that?
Corporate governance is as easy as that. And that's why we keep saying that, and the regulators need to be up on their game, because insider borrower is something that the regulator would definitely know when they are auditing this result, because some of all these things come up when you are auditing the bank result. So you need to look at insider borrowing. It's not so much of a big challenge, because if you look at some of the loans, like you said, most of them are not really driven by insider borrower like that, but of course they are there. Or maybe they are fronting for one company or the other. These are meant for the regulators to really deal with. That's why we say you cannot build $1 trillion economy with $1 billion regulators. So you need to also make sure that your regulators are trained on how to handle $1 trillion economy, not just $1 million economy. So that boils down to regulators not doing their work, because insider trading is not something that cannot be seen if the regulators are really doing their work, which is to make sure they audit this bank and to know who you are giving this fund and what these funds are meant for, and to make sure that these funds are being paid back, because remember, it's shareholders' money that are there, and also it's bank customers' money that are being used to give to these people.
All right, interesting. What a way to wrap up this conversation. Muta Mohammed, we want to appreciate you for your time and your submission on the issue of the inflation rate, and also talking about the impact of impaired loans, which has become an issue to reckon with. Thank you for your thoughts and providing the right perspective as regards these issues.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure always. Thank you.
All right, Blessing.
Yes, I do hope that the right things are done quickly to avert the problems that could happen with having impaired loans, because if you look at the banks that have a high percentage of this happening, they're the first tier banks, and really it will not be a good thing to see that they're beginning to have issues. But I think that as a follow-up to this development, is going to be stringent scrutiny before loans are given to people, and so businesses will need to really prove beyond reasonable doubt that they can service the loans and of course repay the loans before loans will be given to people, because you can't have a trend like this continuing. But that said, I hope that the right things are done and that the macroeconomic environment will improve. The economy of Nigeria improves so that businesses can thrive. When business people take loans, it is for them to expand. And I hope that expansion actually happens. That's been the show today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. You can join us again tomorrow, 8 a.m. West African time, for another episode of Early Exchange. And coming up at 10 a.m. on Souq News will be Market Insight with Adisua Ermusele. I am Blessing AJ. Thank you for watching. Do have yourself a great day and stay with Souq News.
And from me to you, I put this to you: you don't know what you can do until you try. So keep doing your best to be a better version of who you are. Don't forget, Early Exchange returns tomorrow, and I am Femi Ayodele. Bye for now.